At the recent International Association for Near Death Studies conference in Scottsdale, Arizona, I had the chance to hear Stephen Nowak give a presentation about his near death experience, which was really wonderful, wonderfully explained, and it was profound and deep and something I really hadn't heard about before. And what really struck me was at the end, he was describing this process of healing that he learned as a result of his near death experience. And when he was describing this process, the energy in the room shifted. And it did it multiple times as he was talking about how to bring himself back to center. You could feel the energy in the room change. That's never happened to me before, especially in a public presentation like that where there's a room full of 600 people. So I just had to have him on this show to tell his story, which is really good, and to talk a little bit about this healing process and why it is so effective and how it is important to his life and for all of us. So here's the official bio for Stephen. At 4 years old, Stephen was run over by a vehicle and comforted by an angelic being of light. This angelic being took him through the white light into heaven, where he felt he was home. But it told him it wasn't his time, and it took him instead to the quantum field. Stephen hid his experience for many years until the same being made contact again with him when he was 33 years old, and he discovered a natural gift for healing. That began a series of supernatural events that would teach him about the mysteries of human reality. Steve shares his gift with clients around the world with the hope of sharing his gift. People are able to experience their own unique potential to heal. This is our interview with Stephen Nowak. Stephen, it's really nice to have you here on the Afterlife Files. Thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for having me here.
So, Stephen, as I talked about, we met at the IONS conference, and you told the story about how you had a near death experience when you were 4 years old. So let's start there.
Right. I'm across the street at the neighbor's house, and my brother, who was on the other side of the road, at our house, he's calling over to me. We're gonna go to the mall, and I'm like, "Oh, okay." I hear mall, and I shoot down the driveway between two parked cars, and there's a car coming. So the car hit me. Eventually, I went underneath the car, and the car didn't even know they had hit me. So they kept going. People at the stop sign, that was probably about 50 feet later, stopped her. And what I remember is a blur. And all of a sudden, I'm looking at myself, and I see my eyes roll in the back of my head. Next thing is the screen just fades to black and it opens up again. And my first sense is like feeling, and I can feel that I'm leaning on someone. I'm kind of leaning to my side. They're holding me. My head is down. I kind of got my head on their chest. And I open my eyes, and the very first thing I see is hair that's almost touching the ground. And it's almost like luminescent, as we would describe it, but it's harder to describe. But it's long hair, and I see the bottom of a robe, like a grayish robe. And I think to myself, who is this? What happened? And I kind of looked up and turned at him and expecting a person. And to my surprise, it's a hooded figure that has no face. They only have light for a face where their face should be. And so I'm kind of looking for a moment. And then I ask this being or whoever I'm with, what happened? And they said, "Stephen, you were in an accident put your head down, everything's going to be fine. And so I did at that moment put my head on this being's chest. I had a few passing thoughts like, how did I talk without talking? And just a few random thoughts. And as I'm staring at this being's face, I can feel myself being pulled towards it. And now I'm in the light and I'm kind of going through it. And eventually I arrive at like a scene that opens up, and it's flowers and it's meadows upon meadows with golden paths going through them. There's mountains and there's rivers, and it's more vibrant than our reality. And that's all I could say is that's the real world. And this is, the other world we're in. But it was more vibrant and alive, and I could feel the colors were like their own beings. They were their own sentient beings. I could feel the flowers were also the same. And I could see the colors moving through everything. And I'm looking at this path. I see people in the distance and they're playing. It looks like they're having fun, and as I'm watching them, I'm getting filled with like the feeling of like being at a carnival almost. And it's just fun. And I noticed these two figures that were playing. It's an elderly man and a young girl. And they're kind of off to my left at the end of this path, this golden like brick path. And they're playing. And the little girl lets out a laugh. And as she does, just goes through the air and it touches me in the center of my heart, because I'm standing just watching all this taking place, absorbing it. Touches me in the heart, and I instantly knew everything there was love, and that it had to be love to even be there, that it couldn't form function unless it matched this certain vibration or frequency. And that was just somehow innately downloaded into me. So I want to stay there. And I asked the being, can I stay here? And they say, no, we're sorry, it's not your time yet. We have other things to show you. And that's when it was like somebody pulled the curtain at a play, and all of a sudden that scene went away. And I'm standing in what looks like a night sky, kind of, but without stars, not quite black. You can still see and everything. And I see these lines. I start to notice these lines going up and down appear, almost like graph paper. It was like grid lattice. And the being tells me, this is the quantum field. This is how people build their reality using their thoughts and their emotions. That sends a signal to this field, and then it goes back through them. And that's their reality. And I'm just watching, still semi dream state. Like, am I dreaming? What's going on? But I didn't have too much thought about what was happening. I'm just mostly watching. And that fades away. The next thing I see is this pillar of light. And I'm sort of looking down on it now, as opposed to looking straight at it, almost like you're in a skybox. I see this pillar of light coming down, and I see these extensions from this pillar going all the way around to this outer rim, if you will. It looked like a wheel. And they tell me that as you come into this world, you're pure love, as this is you in the center, and then you spend your energy that gets stored in this field to have an experience with material reality. So you're spending your identity to experience this place. And I'm looking like at these extensions, and I say, I wonder where that goes, in my mind. And I'm trying to focus on the screen. And then I realized there's like these little, look like TV sets in the screens, and that they were memories. And I was just seeing little pictures of things I had done before. And that's when they tell me every thought, feeling, and action is recorded in this field. And when people pass, they go through kind of like best way I could frame it is like a 2-hour movie. But they told me they go through like a review, but they don't have to wait until they pass to do this review. So that's what they told me about that situation. But it was like a movie screen all the way around me that held all these experiences. I suppose I had up till four, possibly past life in there. So that fades. And then I noticed something up in like the left hand distance corner, and it's kind of like glowing out of the backdrop. So it's kind of like sticking out. But I had to really look or try to focus on whatever it was to see it. And it looked like a credit card that was missing one corner, and it had circuits on it like a motherboard. And they tell me this is your device. Like as I start to kind of look and see what it is, and okay, I see it. They tell me this is your divine blueprint. Every person has one, and this is where their original creation was generated from, and something they can also use when they're ready for redemption. And later, I figured out it matched, some correlations with things I was researching about myself. But the key was to this divine blueprint. People, they told me people need to believe they are this. And that was it. Believe they are this image. Um, so that faded. And then I see a triangle that's sort of coming towards me. And it's got the same made out of the same bluish lines that were going up and down, except it's more glowing, and it has 3 points, naturally a triangle, but 3 points of energy as well, and one in the center. And they tell me this is the Trinity. This is Father, Mother, and Son. Make the three one. And I'm like, okay, I'm just watching this happen, listening. Um, and then that triangle faded away, but would be coming back later for sure. And so I wake up from that and I have toys, and I'm asking my parents what happened, and they're telling me an accident, but it doesn't feel right. There's something else. I'm like, no, no, there was something else happened. Um, and so it took about 7 years until I was 11 years old.
So, Stephen, there's two things that you mentioned I wasn't quite clear on. One was you're looking at a wheel and
Mm-hmm.
you're spending your energy to, kind of flesh out this wheel. But then there's some sort of gray screen. Where does that fit in where we see our past
Uh,
life?
this was like a screen that was going around me. It was the rim of the wheel was the screen.
Got it.
And they told me, as you come in, you're perfect love. And then you spend your energy and it's stored in this screen.
And then the second thing you said was that there is this divine blueprint that looks like a credit card with the corner
Mm-hmm.
snipped off, and that we're all created in that image. I'm having a hard time picturing myself as a credit card.
Well,
Explain that a little more, will you?
I would explain it in the thought pattern that I am an energy playing a character, that I'm a condensed waveform down into density, and that my original image came from that circuiting. So when my higher self is present in the 3D, my circuiting is connected to that divine blueprint. When I'm generating other distortions, more connected to the world, then I'm kind of disconnected from that blueprint. But I can tell you it's a quantum waveform generator aspect where it's helping us insert ourselves and log into this reality in a way.
Yep. So I think it's really interesting that all this happens when you're 4 years old. Um, Clearly, you've had time to think about this. Seems like very sophisticated interpretations for a 4 year old. So how did that work between when you had your accident and how you began to see it and live it as a kid.
Yeah, it took about 7 years. Like, even though I knew something had happened, it was like trying to remember what you ate for lunch last week on a Wednesday, you know? I knew it happened, but okay. Well, about 7 years passed, and I was 11 years old, and that's when I started to get the first memories of sitting with this being. Didn't quite know what we talked about yet. So they came in pieces, um, as they did when I probably went through puberty, is what was happening as these memories started to come back. I tried to talk to my parents, maybe my two close friends, but I realized it either made me feel awkward or nobody cared. And there was nothing really else to it. So they're like, yeah, so. And I'm like, all right, that was weird. I don't really need to talk about it. It was just a memory of something that happened when I was 4. And I'm gonna keep it for myself, you know? So it affected me. It made me really sensitive and processed a lot of data and information that I probably normally wouldn't have I hadn't had that experience. Um, but between the ages of probably 11 and 17, these memories just started to come back and piece themselves together. And even though I knew, okay, we talked about a triangle that was Trinity, I still didn't know what it meant. It took me many years and what happened next to figure out, what some of it meant.
Got it. Okay, so now we're going to flash forward to when you're 33 years old
Hmm.
and an experience comes to you. Jump
Sure.
in there.
Sure. By this time, I had flipped cars over at very high rates of speed, played a lot of sports, had so much pain in my body, still injuries from getting run over, that I was in debilitating pain, addiction, depression. I was in a dark space, really dark space, you know, when this happened, and it entirely changed my world.
Pause. What do you mean by you flip cards over? You were a
Uh,
magician or
driving, no, driving 80 miles an hour, um, being
oh
young, flip coming around a corner, flipped the car over five
oh, I'm
times.
sorry. What I heard was cards like King, Jack, Queen, Ace.
Oh, no, I'm sorry. I mumble. Uh, I forgot to mention I was run over by a car, so I mumble. But so basically, I had endured, I thought, as much pain as my body could take, that I'd be in a wheelchair by the time I was 50, and that I was deserving of pain, that I was all these things that my childhood programming had set in me, that I deserved to suffer. So the moment, my world really changed was to fast forward when I was having that surgery. I was having surgery on my elbow just to clear up scar tissue. Um, and I get in and I sit down, and I hadn't had any medication yet. And I'm getting kind of panicked. I'm getting nervous, and I have no idea why. I never felt that panicked in my life about anything, but it was like it was autonomous. It just came up, and I told myself, I got to get out of here. And I didn't know why. And I was just about to sit up when this energy started from my feet, and I could feel it physically, the pressure of it all the way around my body. And then I got warm, and I felt a love I had never experienced except for at that age of 4 and in that place. So I felt this love, and then I heard this voice. Well, this love actually kind of pushed me down and sat me down, and I was like, wow, everything's going to be all right. And I heard this voice say, Stephen, put your head down, everything's going to be all right. And all of a sudden, it was like somebody hit rewind on a tape reel. I started having all these visions like fly by my vision. Um, and I started to have all these emotions, and my body just started vibrating on its own. And then I went in and had the surgery.
and So you got your elbow cleaned up, but you were visited by a love energy. And how did that change things?
Well, it changed things because it was the same phrase and the same voice that it told me, Stephen, you were in an accident, put your head down, everything's going to be all right. As soon as I heard, Stephen, put your head down, everything's going to be all right, it was like some kind of flood dam broken between this memory and the real world. And it was becoming real in a sense where I could feel it going through my body and I couldn't control what was happening. So it was the recognition of that being.
And did you ever recognize that being? Did it have a name? Did it play a
Um,
part in your future life?
Definitely returned many times, guided me to heal myself and then help heal others. But I recognized them as angels, or Elohim was the name they were giving me, and the strange synchronicities that I couldn't avoid. I mean, I was trying to function as a normal person at this time. I'm working at a video game, well-known video game retailer as a store manager at this time. And I'm trying to function now. So this event happens where I hear this being, all these emotions and these visions start. I recognize, oh my God, this is real. It's happening in real time, like right now. I go home. A few days later, I start to see balls of light in my room. I'm waking up and I'm like, is that a ball of light in the room? I'm like looking around for the lamp. No, there's no lamp there. I'm going through these motions like I'm crazy. And I'm looking around for reflections. No, everything's closed. Nobody's driving by. And it was about the size of a softball, and it was bluish white. Um, so it's kind of pulsating, and it's just moving, and I'm like very, very slowly moving, like to where I could barely tell if it was moving or not. And then I just went back to bed, not thinking much of it. And then it happened where there was like two more balls of light. Um, I'm keeping all this to myself at the time because to me, sharing this stuff made you look crazy. That's my first impression I got as soon as I tried to share any of it. So I go back to work. Um, I'm starting to have other strange experiences. Now I'm starting to hear people speak in my mind and I'm hearing their thoughts. And I'm like, I'm hearing this person's thoughts. And I could hear it being spoke clearly in my mind in a female or male voice, depending on who it was. And it took me a little while to catch on that that's what it was. But I would start playing a game where I would say, in my mind, do you want a bag with that? And I would hear yes or no. And then I would compare it to asking them out loud. So the thoughts turned into, all of a sudden I would feel emotions go running through me. I couldn't control it. Like I would laugh for no reason. I would cry for no reason. Next came hunger. I literally would eat a full meal, have someone walk in, and all of a sudden I'm gut wrenchingly hungry. And that took a little bit to figure out, but we had such little payroll. I was the only one there. So I'm having people walk in hungry. They leave not hungry. So I started asking customers, I'm like, are you hungry? And a couple of people turned around and just walked straight out the door. The other few people said yes. And so that was kind of bringing some intensity to my reality. Um, then probably a couple of weeks later, I'm going to the gas station and I go in, pay for my gas, and there's a man standing with his child in line. He gets out of line. The kid asks, can I have this candy? Holds it up, shows it to his dad. Sure. Gets back in line, and then he does the same thing, except he only had one. And I'm like, same exact thing. Cashier said the same thing. And I was like, well, that's weird. But okay, weird. I couldn't really say anything else about it. I went back to my car. I started my car, and the radio was already on. And they're talking to this woman who is winning a radio contest. So she's giving them the answer. They're laughing. all of a sudden the phone's ringing on the radio and it's the woman and they ask her the question and I'm like, I just heard the answer. And then that was the day when I was like, do I need to go to the hospital or something? Because I was experiencing like these time shifts. I didn't know
So,
what was happening.
so you're replaying the scene that just happened.
Right.
You
Yeah.
jump back 10 seconds and then lived it
Yeah.
again. Okay.
Either that or I was vibrating so fast that I was picking it up before it materialized. I have no idea. Um, but I know it felt like during these few weeks where strange things started to happen that I had a nuclear reactor in my belly. It was such a big energy that I couldn't sleep. It was like just burning and burning away everything that was false. It took me a while to realize that, but then started with basically um, I started reading, finding books. I started trying to go to churches. It didn't matter what church it was. I was just trying to find some answers about what was happening to me. I didn't really find too many. I did find some good people that listened, but not really any of the core deep answers about what happened during my NDE, what was happening to me now, because I was scared. I was genuinely scared. Um, then one day, probably one of the bigger experiences that I had, and I had no religion at this time. My parents never brought us to church or anything. So I'm driving home and I'm being real hard on myself and I'm beating myself up. And I hear this voice off to my right and it starts telling me how beautiful I am, how loved I am, how many people that love me. And I start to feel it, and I hear this perfectly crystal clear voice telling me this stuff. And I say, who are you? And then the voice says, I am. And I'm like, yeah, I am who? The voice says it again, I am. And then I say, I heard you the first time. That was my back and forth. I am who? And then on the third one, it was like a reflex. It was like somebody pushed up every single emotion I ever had created in my entire life and every memory. And I felt them just and saw them in my eyes just flying through. And I started crying. I couldn't control it. And I had to pull the car over. And it was probably one of the bigger experiences I've had because I had to look up what it even meant afterwards. Um,
Yep.
so
And so all of these experiences led up to where you discovered that you were a healer. How did that switch take place, and how did you know?
Sure. Yeah, I was still at, the retail management job at this time. During that time and the time where I'm having these experiences, I had a woman fall down outside my store. She was elderly, and I was the first one that saw her. So I got there. She was in pain. Um, Somebody came out from the bread store next door, and I said, call the EMS. They went, and for some reason, and it just wasn't me. I wasn't this character at the time where I was open and loving with everyone. I was pretty closed off. I put my hand on her back and she turned to me a couple seconds later and said, I'm all warm and I don't have any more pain. And she was just groaning and crying. And I felt the warmth go up my hands, up my arm. And eventually the EMS came and my whole body got warm, in fact. And I went back to work and I was just like, what was that? It's these events just one after the other, after the other, after the other. And I couldn't explain it. So I started to research healing, hands-on healing. And I found Reiki. And that's where I started studying some of that. And it started kind of pulling me out of that job sector where I couldn't do retail anymore. It was just too invasive on my energy. I was experiencing these things I couldn't control. That's when I kind of transitioned to service and senior care with Alzheimer's and dementia. Eventually, I did transition out of that into healing, but it was in stages of embodiment where I had light all up in my mind, and I was very intellectual, and it sank down into my heart, and I became more service to humanity. And then I brought it into the 3D where it became truth. So I had that I am experience. And then one night I'm sitting around watching TV, and I start to notice things passing me by, walking by the light, just little blips. And I'm like, thinking maybe I'm just seeing things out of the corner of my vision. A few days later, they turn into full bodied apparitions. Um, some smoky, some dark, some light. It took a few weeks before I started speaking to them and saying, "Hey, you're not welcome here," because I thought I was being haunted. And they start returning phrases like, "Ah, we're going to drag you to hell. You're a POS. You're never going to do anything good with your life," mixed in with very few good phrases. Um, so now I'm starting to experience that. I'm kind of terrified at the time. And during the time I'm experiencing that, these beings show up. They're in the corner of my room. I felt the whole room change. I saw like a rainbow hued energy. And they say, "We're from the Galactic Federation of Light." And now, during the time where I'm trying to get rid of these apparitions, thinking I'm haunted, they're kind of whispery. There's human spirits mixed in. There's other entities that I'm just waking up that are really around everywhere. So they're kind of whispery. The voice of these beings that showed up in the corner of my room was crystal clear. And they say, "We're from the Galactic Federation of Light. We're Arcturians, and we're here to help you upgrade your DNA because you're going to help with the evolution of humanity." And I'm like, "Yeah, whatever, Jack." And at this time, I'm so overloaded with all this stuff. I'm literally eating a bowl of Cheerios at the time. I'm like, "Dude, I'm eating my Cheerios. You got to come back later." But they said they were also from the Divine Council of Nine. That was one other thing they said. So they leave, and I look up on the phone, and I'm like, "This is okay. There's real stuff to this." Um, Still going through deciphering whether I'm haunted or not, seeing these apparitions. Then eventually it got so bad to where I couldn't shut it off. I was having spasms in the side of my head. As I would lay down and my brainwave would change, it was like something else was hijacking it. So a few weeks passed by, maybe a month. Arcturians come back again, and I listened to them because they had kind of proven themselves with me finding this information. They tell me I'm a divine instrument, but I'm out of tune, and that a lot of what I'm witnessing, everything in fact, was happening through me, not to me. So they gave me the inner perspective. They said I was in control, that I was a divine instrument that was out of tune. And they literally started to guide me. They said, "Have your thoughts match how you feel, and look at anything that doesn't match, and start tuning your mind and heart to work together." And that was kind of the first steps of helping me self heal. Um, and then not too long after that, I'm doing these practices. I'm still experiencing synchronicities. I have a vision of myself, and like as I'm driving again, I have this vision of myself in like it's called a vector equilibrium. It's sacred geometry, and the only sacred geometry that has all even equal sides. I thought it was a Merkaba at the time. People might recognize the name Merkaba, but it was almost like I instantly knew it was my vehicle. Um, and I'm envisioning or seeing this as I'm driving around me in the car, and I could see almost like window panes, and they were shifting. And I understood as these shifted, my perception of the world shifted, and that this was some kind of anchoring that I was in. Um, that passed, and a couple weeks later, I start having dreams where I'm going on the ships. I'm waking up covered in sweat. I got like a white slick suit, no hair, entirely bald, and I'm going to different areas. Like one was a medical bay, the first one. Um, And then there was other areas with pods that had like these highly intelligent, sentient souls. And that then came the memories of logging in, standing at a console and programming part of my experience. Um, then came, I don't know if you want to break in at all.
Yeah, I was thinking that all these experiences have led to this healing method that you are an expert in, that you have rediscovered and brought forth into this world. Tell us a little bit about what that is, how it works, so that we can kind of end
Sure.
on a note of, whoa, this is cool stuff.
Absolutely. Well, it's based on the Trinity, the triangle I saw when I was 4, and then was taught um, by these other beings who came to visit me and lifted me out of a chair. During that time, that's when I noticed I had no pain. And as I sank back into my body, my pain came back. And then my goal became to get back to that place. And I realized it was my home. But the Trinity method is based on us having divine feminine, divine masculine energy, heaven and earth, but also father and mother and son. And they taught me that I had a son in the center and that I needed to, in order to activate this son, to take all my negative neurotransmission as a conscious act and send it back through my heart space. And that this would start a process or a union of positive and negative aspects of myself. This would also create a direct current to where I was fully grounded in a 0 point maximum ground state, neutral point, to where I could control the polarity in my cells rather than the environment polarizing me and pulling my energy out of the present moment with either fear, worry, stress, anxiety back into the past with shame, guilt, or regret. I wanted to control the motion, in other words, not circumstances, environment. Um, so that's where I started implementing the Trinity as a circuit and something that also unionizes our mind, heart, and gut or body. And it brings our three energy bodies into one. Now, when I later heard them say, make the three one, I didn't realize what I was doing. I'm just going through this and then I'm being healed. Now I take nothing for pain. It healed me from all the depression, addiction, debilitating pain. Doctors are like, oh, you're going to need a fake hip by the time you're like, dude, I don't feel nothing because my frequency is basically high enough to keep these other lower energies from functioning. And this was like 20 years ago, they told me this. And then the back injuries from my accident. And I do everything I want to do. And pain is now a messenger. If I feel pain, then I use it as a message to move back to my identity, that love, that image that I was made in. To basically go back to heaven, as they told me that we could do now while we're alive, that we don't have to wait to get into heaven, that we're already there. And then they taught me about gnosis. So there's a bit of gnosis in there and working with our will to connect our thought to truth, and correct the wiring. Because what happens is we get wired into safe mode and then we want to crack that safe mode and these old trauma programs, because all those emotions and the trauma programs are what caused me the physical pain. So working with the Trinity, I was able to unionize these two poles so that they became one neutral point, one director of everything, my heart.
And so you discovered this for yourself, and then you started doing it for or on other people.
Yeah, I just had people who, they were interested in like what I would put on Facebook or what I would talk about. And they're like, hey, maybe you can help this person I know, so and so. And I'm like, well, I'll try. And then it snowballed and snowballed and snowballed. And now, about 7 years later, um, I help hundreds of people literally around the world. They taught me how to reprogram people's cellular memory for healing from no matter what distance, and then to show them how to do it because I want to show them the love that saved me. I want them to feel that love.
So I'm glad that you said that we can do this ourselves. We
Mm-hmm.
can learn how to do that. What's the process that you lead people through?
I would lead them basically through connecting with the Trinity, asking. For me, it looks like asking Holy Spirit, an aspect of Divine Mother, to enter my consciousness. And I usually see like almost like an electrical cord coming down, and I'm going to plug it into my heart. So I usually ask the Holy Spirit to enter my consciousness. I ask Christ to expand within me once I get that plug in, and then I ask Creator to surround me. And now I'm finding little things to give gratitude for, and I'm growing in energy. And now I want to take that energy that I grow, thankfulness, gratitude, love, and then tell myself I'm already whole, I am already validated, I am already forgiven, and now I'm creating a program that's going to hold my energy in the present moment because we're like quantum batteries where we get zeroed out when we have these negative thoughts, negative energies that pull us again either to the past or too much into the future. So I want to create this energy in me, connect to the Trinity first because I'm bringing positive and negative together so they alchemize and activate my 0 point energy. I ask the Trinity in, give thanks, and then I tell my nervous system, I already am. Now I'm less seeking outside of myself for those things in the world. And that's where I get tripped up is through my identity. So I want to make sure my identity is grounded in I'm all of creation. I'm a divine being. Those are the things I want to speak into my body because that's going to help my body heal. Because I figured out what didn't help it heal, that's for sure, was all these other things that got spoke into it. At first, I thought I was doing it for me. I never thought I would share it with anybody. And then eventually it got to be, hey, do you want to tell your story? Do you want to help this person and this person? And it brings me joy and love to see them touch who they really are instead of what the world tells them. And I know everybody can do it. It's just that I saw things and experienced things that showed me that.
And so, if I understood you correctly, it's like a series of affirmations. I'm not
It's
sure
almost
that's
like
the right word.
hitting buttons and switches. But what I truly want to do is connect my thought to what truth feels like in my body, and I'll tell clients, ask yourself, do I know how to tie my shoes right now? Do I know how to make a bowl of cereal? Now put in your thoughts where I am a sovereign being. And you want to hit that non-negotiable truth because then you know your thought traveled to your gut and now you're magnetizing your whole light body instead of just that doubtful signal. So it's really that mind, heart, body connection that you're looking for to bring that 3D manifestation of whatever creative character you want to be because you're just playing a character. You're an energy playing a character.
Got it. So, we're bumping up against our time limit here.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but is there anything that you haven't talked about that there's a kind of a hole in this interview that you'd like to fill in? Leave us with a thought, would you?
Well, I would leave you with that. If you start speaking to your body as if things are already accomplished, then your body can and will heal. Um, don't let the world identify you or capture your identity because there's a lot of programs out there, and this was revealed to me that want to harvest our potential through our identity to make us feel like we're less than worthy, we're not fast enough, we're not skinny enough, we're not muscular enough, whatever it may be. A lot of those things are tying down your energy. So it's important to give yourself a routine of programming your subconscious each morning, um, and understanding that you're already in heaven, but it's a lot of these energies and programming that are put on us that you don't need to carry anymore moving into the future. That's what keeps us from remembering.
Yep, it's one of the aspects about living in duality. Um, so, if people want to find out more about you and your work and how to do this for themselves, where should they go?
You can go to trinityquantumhealth.com. You can reach me there, or you can look for my Facebook page, Trinity Healing. Um, should be able to find me either one. And if you have any questions, just let me know. But
I,
I often work with, kids who have autism, people who have cancer, and a lot of stuff I do donate my time. So just don't hesitate to ask.
what a wonderful offer. Thank you, Stephen. This has been a terrific interview, and we're so glad that you've been able to join us.
I'm super, super thankful to be here today to share with you.
And for those of you watching this, stick around because I've got an interesting comment that I think you're going to like. So, see you on the flip side. I told you that was going to be a great story. There are three things about Stephen's interview that really struck me. One is that how important it is to be able to touch base with the loving consciousness of the world. And we know from near death experiencers that loving consciousness is irreducible and the fundamental nature of all things, all of duality and all of physicalness come out of that loving consciousness. So he tied that back into that and how important that is to have our vibrations come from that vibration. Second thing is that when we do work with near death experiences and people who want to enter back into that space again, this loving consciousness is what we use um, for healing. It's what we use for manifesting. It's even the same energy that we use to help bend spoons and knives and other forms of cutlery. So that ability to touch base with loving consciousness is fundamental and irreducible when it comes to affecting things here in the material world. The last thing that really struck me about this is he talked about how it is important that we view things as already done. Now, we know in the land of the non physical, it's outside of time and space. So to say that you want something in the future doesn't make sense there. What makes sense is to declare what already is, because that is living in the present. So when he said it's important to say, I am of divine origin, I am healed, I am whole, it's we are declaring what already is in the non-physical and we're bringing it into the physical because that's the vibration that ties the two together. So he used different words, but I was struck by how similar it is to the experiences of people who've had near death experiences and how they talk about this interplay between the physical and non physical worlds. Great job, Stephen. And thank you all for sticking around till the very end here. I appreciate you being with us here in the Afterlife Files, and we'll see you in our next interview. Bye now.